All right, welcome back. We are COMP397 in the winter 2021 semester, and it is week 9, part 1 of our broadcast. We'll see if we have more than one part this time around. We're sitting at week 9, and it's mobile game design time. So last week, what we did was I got you guys to download and install LD Player. And LD Player basically is an online or virtual machine that basically is an emulator that emulates a mobile device. And I also configured Unity to target Android. So that's last week. So we talked about that, how to do an Android build target, as well as how to connect LD Player to Unity. I also talked about mobile touch, and we built a joystick kind of out of a joystick set that I shared with you, and I said that was okay to use. And we deployed and tested everything to LD Player, and that was pretty good. So I think those are really great things to go with. And that was Lab 9. Lab 8. Lab 9 this week is very simple. There's only one thing we're doing. It's Scriptable Objects. I shared this stuff with you, but I had a bunch of requests. And this week, what we were supposed to do is converting already from WebGL to mobile. We did that last week. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fit in a Scriptable Object saving and loading thing that's due for your assignment coming up. Assignment 2 part 1 most likely. All right, so that is due. And if you look at the time frame from when that's due, Lab 9 is due this Saturday. It's coming up. Assignment 2 part 1, that's due this Sunday. And please ensure you sign up for A2 groups. So there's A1 groups, assignment 1 groups. And now I've created assignment 2 groups. Some of you have requested to be removed from the group that you were in with your partner because you didn't have a good time with them or whatever. And so I've made it possible for you to regroup and, kind of take the idea that you had from assignment 1 and make your own. Most of you will stay together, I think. There's a lot of people who have produced something that's really decent, I think, and some people who haven't. So please, if you haven't had a chance to already, kind of sign up for A2 groups. If you're the same group, that's fantastic. If you have a problem and you sign up for the wrong group and you need group assistance, like for me to remove you or something like that, stay back after class or message me on Discord and I'll be able to remove you, fix you, and do whatever I have to do with you from a group perspective. All right, so again, sitting at week 9, just looking ahead a little bit. Next week, we'll be talking about procedurally generating worlds with Perl and noise and how to do that. And if you're someone who is interested, that might be an interesting topic for you next week, as an example. And then week, assignment 2, part 2, which is the second part of the mobile design process, is due the week after. And then finally, by the end, your final presentation is due by the end of the end of semester, and that is where your final release is due as well. So your final release and your final presentation all due at the end on week 13. We're also going to be talking about multiplayer networking, but that is not a requirement for you to implement in your game. But for those people who want to, we'll talk about what that is and how to make sure if you're interested in doing something. I'm not sure we're going to use, there might be, I'm looking at Mirror. The two options are, or the other way to do it without Mirror is to use something like Photon or Pun. And Pun 2 is out. We might be using that for multiplayer networking, so to give you a chance to make your game multiplayer. But again, totally not required, and it'd be good to do it, but if you don't do it, that's totally fine. I think it'll be fun to do that lab, though, when we get into multiplayer networking. So it'll be like a complete 3 hours of work. All right, so this week, what are we doing? We're talking about designing mobile games, and if you follow the pattern, it talks about monetization and some really good material here on how to do mobile game design. So if you haven't had a chance to look at that, please go through the material that's in the course shell. So it's on eCentennial. In here, it talks about mobile game design elements, how to create a mobile game, how to monetize, and how to convert a game from WebGL to mobile. So that's what I talk about in here. But what we're going to get into today from a practical perspective is not that, but actually it's toward the bottom part of your presentation slide, which is here, Scriptable Objects. What are they? How do we use them? And so on. So let's make that, and hopefully this will help you with a lot of stuff. I also have previously put up a project up on GitHub. So there's 2 projects. One, this is going to be our starter. We're going to start with last week's project, lesson 8. But if you look at up online on Centennial, you'll see that there is a lesson 7 Scriptable Objects demo that I put up earlier when it comes to doing things like swapping out your keys. And especially now, since we're moving to mobile, swapping out your keys for mobile is going to be totally different than swapping out your keys for desktop. So we'll talk about that. We also want to be able to detect from last week. That's one thing I also want to do this week, and I should probably write that down as something else. We want to detect the platform that we're on. So one is we did kind of this thing where we said, okay, we're transporting everything from WebGL to mobile. But we want to detect the platform, and then we're going to talk about how to do platform detection. So again, if it's WebGL or mobile, right? So we're going to look at that, how to detect that and print that out, because we need to do those kind of things. Okay, so there is a way through Unity to do that, and we're going to talk about that. So scriptable objects and all those things. So but first things first, let's get into a couple things. One thing also that is happening is that next week, right? So again, this week is assignment 2 part 1 is due, but assignment 2 part 2 is due in 2 weeks. And what I'd like to do right now is talk about what assignment 2 part 2 is all about. I think that's an important first step, because you know, some of you have had some, I don't know, different ideas about what to submit for the things that I've asked you to make, and hopefully I will kind of correct some of your things. One question I keep getting is, do I have to submit everything you've asked? Yeah, that is definitely something you need to do. If I've asked you to do something on an assignment and you don't hand it in, you'll lose marks. It's pretty simple, right? It's not because I want to be mean or anything. It's just, you just don't have what I've asked, right? So let's get back to this. So let's just go into assignment 2 part 2. So assignment 2 part 1 is due this week, and it's all about making it mobile, right? But assignment 2 part 2 adds additional functionality, and we have to kind of zone into that and focus on it. Now these things, all these assignment parts and the details for all these assignments are up online already. So if you signed up to assignment groups version 2, you're good. Now this is Friday, April the 2nd. We're not making it due on Fridays. I'm moving this assignment due date so it gives you a little bit more time. So if you notice up online, right, let's go to assessments. And under assessments, you're going to see that assignment 2 part 1 is due, it says March 21st. March 21st is a Sunday, my friends. Okay, so that's what I made it do. And the same thing goes with assignment 2 part 2. So assignment 2 part 2, let's edit the folder for a second, and let's take a look what that says. Assignment 2 part 2, and if we go to here, notice it says which we'll call April 4th. So it's due Sunday as well. So please make sure that you know that they're all due Sunday, not Fridays. All right, some people have said that. I moved it to Sundays because I think it's just a better date for you guys to have everything due, as opposed to Fridays. I think it gives you a couple more days, and I think it might just work better for you than making it due on the Friday. So that's that. Okay. So what is this thing we talk about? What is this assignment? So it's really due Sunday. I'm just going to change it here so you see it up on GitHub. Up on YouTube. It's assignment Sunday, April the 4th is when this one is due. Now that sounds like it's far away, but really it's right around the corner. And really what we were focusing on is, you know, a polished game that works on Android this time around. So the second half is all about Android. First half was about WebGL, making your game, you know, finding the fun in your game. But now the second half, starting with your assignment 2 part 1, is converting it from, you know, from WebGL to mobile. So assignment 2 part 2 is you need to have an inventory system that's fully functional by that time. Your you know, kind of fully functional enemy AI. I think that's nothing that's changed there. Fully functional with steering behaviors and pathfinding and everything else you're going to add in there. What I've asked you guys to use is object pooling to create reusable game objects, right? So I've talked about object pooling earlier in the the course shell. And what object pooling is, and just as a really fast note on what that is imagine I want to make several types of enemies. So if I'm just going to give you object pooling in like 2 minutes, this is what it looks like. Okay, so not a line. It looks like this. Okay, let's suppose I have an array or some kind of list of objects. And let's suppose I have an enemy object. So enemy, right? And my enemy object, right, if I only make one of them inside the pool, and if I keep having instantiating and destroying objects, it's computationally expensive. And what it does is it causes something called memory fragmentation. So what I'm going to get you guys instead to do is create an object pool. And what object pools look like is an array or a queue. I think queues work a lot better for us. A queue of objects. So we're going to have another enemy and another enemy and another enemy. You know, as an example, we're going to add all these enemies to the queue, let's suppose for multiple enemies. And then what you're going to do is when you need an enemy object, it's going to pop itself out of the queue, right? You're going to use it. And when you're done using it, it's going to return itself back into the queue from the other side. So basically what you're doing is you're making reusable objects as opposed to instantiating and destroying objects as you go, which is a poor way of managing memory, especially on mobile, right? So you definitely want to use object pooling for getting enemies out and restructuring enemies. So I've talked about object pooling inside of your course shell, how to use it and what that is. And there are some great resources on how to do that. So if you look at game programming patterns, right? Game programming patterns is here. It's that link that I keep on sharing with you guys for a bunch of different things. So one of them, if you look at the web version of game programming patterns, right? There's something called object pooling. So object pooling is right here. So this is the link for game programming patterns / object pool. And really it talks about things like memory fragmentation, which is what's happening. And also it's computationally expensive to instantiate and destroy objects. And it talks about how to use the pattern, when to use it. And it even shows you a little bit of pseudocode on how that would look. This is kind of an example of a particle. Doesn't matter if you're using a particle system or if you're using an enemy or a bullet, you can use object pooling to instantiate and destroy stuff. But instead of instantiating and destroying, you're just instantiating first. You're building up a pool of objects. And then what you're going to do is you're going to reuse them over and over again. So we'll see if we can kind of show you some of this as well over the next week or so. So that is the pattern that I've asked you to do here. So one thing I've asked is please make sure you demonstrate object pooling in your video, right? When you do your video for assignment 2 part 2. You're also going to create and update your game design document. Guys, I've seen some really, I'll say, incomplete game design documents where you haven't updated anything. And if you don't update stuff from one release to the other, you just lose marks. That's what's going to happen every single time. It's worth a portion of your marks, and the rubric will basically remove marks if you don't hand it in. GitHub. I've also seen GitHub being used the bare minimum amount. And what I mean by that is literally you don't hand in anything. Your GitHub either is not working or you have one commit per release. That's not using GitHub properly. We talked about using GitHub in the beginning. GitHub is to be used on a regular basis to track your progress with the game. And so you can use it to backtrack or revert your changes if you need to, as well as collaborate with others. And so there's 3 main reasons to use GitHub: backup, version control, where we do all our versioning, and collaboration. And some of you aren't using this properly. Only one person is committing to your GitHub pages, and you're not collaborating at all with anybody. As well, there's only 3 commits for 3 releases. That's insane, guys. I'm sorry to tell you. You need to make multiple commits when you work on your game, right? I know this takes a lot of time, but it protects your game versus, things like you losing assets, which some people have actually come forward and said, Tom, everything was working great, but I lost all my assets and I can't get them back. Where's your GitHub is my question, right? And of course, they don't have GitHub. Their GitHub's not working, or they don't know how to use it. So it's pretty late in the game for you guys to come forward and say, I don't know how to use GitHub. I haven't been using GitHub the entire time. Okay. So that's some part of it. Project management tools. Some of you are sharing your Trello board with me, but it's not working for me. In order for me to see your Trello board, you need to include me, guys, in order for me to do that. Otherwise, just take screenshots. I don't need you to include your Trello board. Take screenshots and include them at the end, of your document. I didn't ask you to give me Trello access, but if all you give me is a link to your Trello, you'll lose marks every single time for project management. Okay, so please make sure you give me the stuff that I've asked for. And then now the new thing is build and test your game on the emulator. So I recommend LD Player. You cannot build and test your game in the editor anymore, nor can you build and test your game. And I talked about that for the last release. So the release that's due this weekend, coming up this Sunday, you need to test it in the emulator. Okay, that's on LD Player or something else, BlueStacks, whatever you want, or alternatively on a real device. If you just test it in the editor, guys, for assignment 1 or assignment 2 part 1, you will lose marks. Okay, that's not what I'm asking for. Just like if you don't build something live on assignment 1 part 3. If your site is not live on assignment 1 part 3, you'll lose marks. Okay, which is what I've asked. So please make sure you go through and you follow what I've asked you, and make sure you've taken care, check mark every one of these things that I've asked you for. So common requirements, right, as an example, I've asked for an additional common requirements for the different kind of games. If you see platformer runner, a platformer runner is not a shooter, okay? When I say a platformer runner shooter, that means you just can't make a first-person shooter. A first-person shooter is not enough. You need a platformer. You need platforms, guys. No platforms, you will lose marks. It's pretty simple. Same thing with isometric tower defense. You have an isometric screen, but no towers, you'll lose marks, right? It's pretty straightforward. So please make sure you check mark all the stuff that I'm asking for, as well as your game design document. I'm giving you 10 marks for these things, so make sure you go through and you check mark the stuff that I've asked you to do. Update your mechanics, dynamics, and aesthetics. Update your screen captures. Those kind of things are the things that I'm looking for, okay? So when you look at the document, go through it and make sure you satisfy all the requirements that I've asked you for. Not half of them or most of them, all of them. Also, one more thing, when you submit your video, going forward in assignment 2 completely, I will not accept a video that is not a link. Some of you have given me more than 700 megabytes to a gigabyte of video. Guys, that's unacceptable. I don't know how many times I've told you guys, please do not give me that. I don't know why. I don't want to make this a whiny session for me to you, but I can't. It's not fair, guys. I have a gigabyte of download. There's 30 teams that I have to look at as an example. 30 teams. And if that's 30 gigabytes, I'm not going to download 30 gigabytes of stuff, guys. I refuse. All right. So it's not something that's acceptable. I want you guys to put things on links. And some of you are also recording your screen with your phone. And as opposed to using screen recording software, again, you will lose marks if you don't do what I've asked you to do. Screen recording your phone with your screen with your phone is like, it's like driving a car by pushing it as opposed to using the engine. It doesn't make any sense, right? So please do what I've asked you to do, and then everybody's going to be happy. All right, this one is an update. The only thing I've asked you really to add to this one more than anything else is the things that are detailed here. So there are not that many updates really for this one. You're converting your game to mobile, and I've asked you to do a couple of things here, which is for your platform runner shooter, the inventory system will allow the player to store special items found in the level, such as weapons and keys or ammunitions. For the isometric tower defense, the inventory system, I'm talking about inventory system over and over again, will allow the player to gather resources and place them into the inventory for future use. And sandbox crafting survival game, and I don't think there's anybody doing this, but there would be things that you'd be able to craft with your simple structures and so on. So that is the things that you'd be doing with this little update. But the majority of things are, just to reiterate, for assignment 2 part 2, not for part 1. Assignment 2 part 2 is inventory system, fully functional AI, object cooling. All right, those are the main things that you're adding in, and of course deploying to the emulator. All right, so Again, not a whole lot of improvement since your assignment 1 part 3, but enough that you're going to have some things to put together for your for not this week but 2 weeks from now. Okay. Any questions around assignment 2 part 2? Just to reiterate, I always record what you need for assignment 2 part 1, assignment 2 part 2. So if you look back at assignment 2 part 1, just an example, one more time, just to go over the details for this Sunday. That means this Sunday, March the 21st. Is that the wrong date? Nope. This Sunday, March the 21st, right? What I'm looking for is convert your game, the one that you made in assignment 1, part 1, 2, 3, to mobile. That it has to be a mobile game. That means touch has to work and your game has to be able to be loaded and saved. And I'm going to show you how to do loading and saving today, how to do that stuff, right? There's also another piece that I've asked, which is the factory method design pattern, which again is another pattern that I've brought up. It's inside your documentation, but you can always look up how you can do it up here. If you look at game programming patterns, and if you scroll down to the stuff that's here, you can see that I'm looking for the factory method. Now, one thing that it doesn't include in here, right, as an example, one of them that's not included here on the online version is the factory method pattern. But what I've done instead is I've put it up in your content area. So if you look at the content area, that's why it's important to take a look at these things, right? So this week is game design patterns, right? And if you look at last week's discussion, there is the factory design pattern that I talked about last week. So if you're not reading the documentation, if you're not doing your reading, guys, then in your creational design patterns, I talk about the factory method and what that looks like. All right, so please make sure you take a look at that, because that's one of the things that are required for assignment 2 part 1. You're making a factory, okay? And it talks about how to make factories for things like your enemies and your bullets and a bunch of other stuff. Okay, so that's what it does. And a factory allows you to create different kinds of things. So please go back, read the documentation if you haven't had a chance to already. And I go through details on what that is. Okay, so there's different kinds of things. Factory method used in games, an enemy spawner or a bullet creator. All right, different kinds of bullets. Okay, so please take a look at those 2 examples. You can do one or the other. And if you look at back to the discussion, assignment 2 part 1, which is due this Sunday, is to create various configurable and reusable game objects. So something that you can create. I've given you a lot of leeway with these words. That means you can create pickups that are made with your factory design pattern. You can make enemies that are made with your factory design pattern. You can make with a lot of different things. You need to do a little bit of reading. And there's 3 of you. There's not just one of you doing this, so there should be enough that you guys are going to be doing this. I want you to outline how you're using the factory method design pattern in your video for this Sunday. If you don't, you'll lose marks. Okay? So, all right, so that is kind of the stuff that we're doing for this week. So that's why I'm showing you how to save and load your game. And we're going to start off with lesson 8A as a start off point. So this is our starter right here. So let's download this. I'm just going to download lesson 8A just like you. And we'll start from this, and then we'll get to loading and saving data. Let's try and do that. And again, like I said, I have 2 examples. One is lesson 7 as well of how to do that with switching your keys. Okay, we're going to use scriptable objects in a different way, and I will explain what scriptable objects are and how they can help you and how they work great with mobile devices. Because think about how you would save and load with a mobile device. You really, there's a couple ways to do that. One of them is to use some kind of database. Like, for example, if you use something like a Mongo database or some kind of database to store information. So, or you can use something like Firebase, which is Google's answer to kind of a mobile storage, right? Which is free to use, and it's also compatible with Unity and iOS and Android devices. So as an example, I'm just going to just choose one. Here's something that I already have. So you can do things like storage, hosting, you can do real-time database and a bunch of other stuff, even authentication and machine learning, all with Google Firebase. And it supports iOS, Android, as well as Unity. And if you look at Unity, it talks about how to register your app and how to build it for Firebase and so on. And this is great. But the problem with this is you have to worry about how to do a database with Unity. And that's outside of our scope. So that's why I'm recommending to you, don't do this. Follow along with me today and create a project that uses scriptable objects instead to help us do saving and loading. All right, so let's see how that works. So I'm just going to bring up my file explorer here, and let's go into desktop and Centennial. And last week we had lesson 8A. I've just downloaded it fresh. There it is, right? And we're going to rename this to lesson 9A for our lab. So this should be 9A. And in here, we also have a README file that we're going to replace. So I'm just going to replace the README file. So it says lesson 9 and lesson 9A. So that's the only thing I'm going to change here in the README file. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use command prompt. You can use Git Kraken or whatever you want to put this up on GitHub. But I've been showing you guys how to use GitHub every week, and I'm surprised that you guys aren't doing it. But it is what it is. So git init, git add dot, git commit -m. Sorry, there's a lot of files here. Initial commit. Okay, so that is your project settings, and now we need to put things up on GitHub. We need a repository, so I'm going to go to Centennial and make a new one. So you would make one in your account. Now remember, if you try and give me access to GitHub and it's private, if you made it private, I will never be able to see GitHub, and you'll lose marks every single time, right? So please don't do that. Make sure you give me access to GitHub by making me a collaborator. No collaborator, I cannot see your GitHub. It's pretty straightforward. So, if I can't see your GitHub, I can't give you credit for it. I can only give you credit for the stuff you give me. All right, so let's go into 9A. So that is the empty container. I'm going to grab these last 3 lines of code here, copy them, and go into my command prompt and paste it in, and away you go. All right, so there you go. So this will put everything up, and this will be the first step, the first, kind of like part that we'll do up on GitHub. That'll give us a chance to start going. Notice I still have those warnings for large file support because of the one thing that's really big, which is my my audio track. And again, we'll probably get rid of that later. All right, so let's refresh here, and then if you notice, I'm going to go up on GitHub. Sorry, I'm going to go up on Unity Hub, and I'm just going to add that in. So let's add in Unity Hub. So I'm going to go to my desktop, wherever you have yours, you'd go there. And basically, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to go to lesson 9 and press select folder. Remember that I'm assuming that you have a gitignore file that you're using. If you're not using a gitignore file, this will make your process very painful. Okay, so one thing I want to do with you, since we're here, is I want to do the same thing that we did last time. So one thing we did was convert this to mobile, right? I need to do the same thing. I need to convert it to a platform that's mobile right away. And to support this, and we're going to do testing the entire time, I'm going to bring up LD Player. So LD Player is something that I was using last time. This time around, what I'm also going to do to do some testing is I'm also going to use my mobile phone. So I have my little Samsung Galaxy S7, and I'm going to use that as well, just to give you guys a sense of what if I, because I've had some requests, like what if I want to use my phone, Tom? Is that okay? Yes, it is. In fact, I prefer you to use your phone because it's more realistic than using an emulator, because you're actually going to have something to test with. All right, so I'm going to show you I'm going to show you the phone as well. And I'm using this little app like I talked about last time called Visor. So Visor is a nice little app that I can use. Here it is right here. And it's picking up a couple things. It's picking up my emulator, so this thing. And then it's also picking up a couple of additional things. One thing it's probably picking up is also my Oculus Quest, which is also, in effect, an Android device. So make sure that it's not picking up the wrong thing. So I'm just going to disconnect my Oculus Quest here. Anyway, so you can see that there is a link here and a link here for the G930. That's probably what it is. Let's take a look and see if I can see that device. Again, I'm using an actual Samsung device here, so this is what it's going to look like. Okay, and you can see that I can control my Samsung device just like I normally would, as an example, if I was going to touch it by hand, right? So that's the kind of stuff that I want to do as well. So kind of looking at my Android device. All right, so pretty cool. And so I'm going to do both things. We don't need that anymore. So I have my LD player and my Samsung device to test here. When this came up, notice I don't see anything. I'm going to move into main. So this is going to be my main scene. I'm going to import my TNP Essentials, which is TextMesh Pro. I'm also using preview packages because remember last time what we did was inside of my game scene. So if I change my layout to Tom's 3D layout, then I also have this game scene. And what I want, instead of game, I want it to be simulator. And the simulator is going to show my Samsung Galaxy S10 or S7 rotated in the right direction and showing the safe area. I need to do this so I can see what it looks like here. How would you get a build to your phone? Same way. You connect your phone to Unity, and if you follow the direction for Visor, if you actually go and download Visor, Visor actually gives you some examples about how to load in the stuff that you're required. So for example, let's go there. Since you're asking, if I go to visor.io, under Visor, it says download. And if you go to download, it'll say, well, download for Windows. And then it'll tell you how to download for Windows and then how to set things up. So if you go to support, it'll actually show you how to do things like set things up for Windows. So one of the things that this has, Visor itself, it's a very simple setup. But what it asks you to do is if you can't connect somehow, if you're having connection issues, you can't see stuff, a lot of times it's because your device isn't working. And it says Android not found. Make sure Android USB debugging is enabled. And if you click this, it'll tell you what to do and how to find your Android device and how to download the universal ADB drivers, which is very interesting that they give you them here. And once you download the universal ADB drivers, then you'll be able to, actually select your phone as a deployment device. Excuse me. All right, let's continue. All right, so that is the way you would do it. And there's some instructions here on Visor if you're interested in doing that kind of stuff. But we've already kind of talked about that last week, so we're here. This is nice, but I need to switch because right now it's showing this, but actually my platform, if I go to build settings, is still set to PC, Mac, and Linux. Whenever you download something or start with me, what you need to do is switch to Android from now on. So we're not moving to WebGL anymore. WebGL is done. We're not doing that anymore. We're doing Android. And then we're going to click Switch Platform. And if everything is done correctly, then what's going to happen is it's going to be two things you're going to see. One, it's going to try and convert your textures and your images and all that stuff from a desktop compliant or compatible version to mobile. Okay, that's the thing you're going to see. And we talked about some quality settings last time in order for you to improve things like shadows and that kind of stuff. I will continue to do stuff like that today. So let's go into this for a second. Okay, wonderful. So there it is. And so we have our Android device. Let's go to player settings. And under player settings, under player, a couple things that are required. You need to have some kind of product name under player whenever you want to deploy. So for example, now it's 9A. That's the new product because I just switched to 9A from 8A. Okay, it's, we're using the same thing as the platform. The other thing is I'm not allowing portrait. So I don't want to do portrait orientation, just landscape. And then under other settings, you're going to see a couple of things here. One of them is that Android 7.1 NuGet is the minimum API level, right? And as well as my package name should be something that I name. Instead of having it as 8A now, we're going to move this to 9A because we've already done 8 from last week. Scripting backend must be IL2 CPP, and I'm recommending an API compatibility level of .NET 4.x. That's what I recommend there. And I think this will give you everything you need to get going with your Android deployment. One thing also you want to change is your quality settings. So your quality settings by default, if you notice right now, are medium. And what you can do is down here, these little defaults, you can switch your quality for your Android device to high. And notice that that is checkmarked there as well, right? So that's something you can do. And if you look at medium, so let's look at medium by clicking on it, or high, these are medium and high. High settings allow you to do things like distance shadow masks and all that kind of stuff. And then, so those are your things you want. You can try and do this for your device. Sometimes though, it may not work because your device may not be good enough to show good shadows and all that kind of stuff, only because we're on a mobile device and we're not on a desktop. All right, so that is your quality settings. You want to switch them to high. I recommend that, at least for this day and age. Graphics, again, you notice that I can choose a graphics level, a high tier. Graphics, that's tier 3, and you get that by going to edit, and you're going to graphics tier 3. Make sure that that's graphics tier 3. So that is going to be your high-end graphics tier, and it should be compatible enough so that it works. So that is all the changes we want to make. And to test this, notice that on the where it says run device, it shows you whatever devices are plugged in. One of them is my emulator. So let's first kind of do our first build with what we have already on the emulator. So I'm going to click this emulator and then click build and run. And it's going to ask me, where do I want to go to build? I'm going to do a new folder called builds. And inside my builds folder, I'm going to name the file Android. That's just like a bare minimum file that you would put together. So if I did everything, it's going to deploy to my emulator now, which is LD player, this thing. It's going to deploy here. When done, everything goes well. By the way, now that we're converting, you're going to see that I may cut out here and there, or I might be a little fuzzy because my system is being used as much as possible to convert everything to Android. So it's actually doing the compilation process and converting to binary. All right. So I'm just going to wait till that's done. If you're watching the video, please fast forward when you're done. All right, and let's see how this looks when we're done. So it says building native binary. Just going to wait another minute or so for this to complete. All right, this is good. This is a good sign. And then this building Gradle project, this is the final step for you to build towards a target. Once you have, this is like using your package manager. That's what this is doing here, right? So this is how it should work, and you should be used to doing this because you've seen it before. And we're good, right? And this is what it would look like on our emulator. So far we can look up and down, we can go left and back, we can also jump, and we can turn on our mini map. Now, I'll be honest with you, that might be a little bit small for my device. Let's see what this looks like on my actual device. Let's now deploy to my device. So instead of my emulator being used, let's switch to my actual device, which is this Samsung S7. Now, one thing to note is, before we deploy, one thing to note is my Samsung S7 is not an S10. So if I swap out this to a different phone, so let's go from the Samsung Galaxy S10 to a Samsung Galaxy S7. Here's what it will look like. Okay, this looks different. Notice that there is no area. The safe area, it doesn't go wall to wall of the screen. There's a black area here and here, right? So we want to test for the safe area. Okay, that's one thing that we want to do. And also, when we deploy, notice our resolution here is 2560 by 1440. What I want to do is on my emulator, so if I go to LD player, I've already switched to that resolution, 2560 by 1440, to give us a sense of what this will look like on the emulator, right? So to match what my phone looks like. Okay, that's what I did here. So that's one. The other thing that you may want to do, and later on we want to try and do this, is inside of our canvas settings. So inside canvas, we have all of these loose items like my left stick, my right stick, my jump button, and my map button. Right? Those are all loose items that we have here. And what if I wanted to turn them off? Like let's say I want to support mobile, or sorry, WebGL. Well, I could turn them off one by one, right? I could do that. Okay, I could do that. Or I could put all of these things inside of a mobile, kind of controls, parent. And if I did that, so watch now what happens if I do this. If I kind of select all of these, so left stick, right stick, jump button, and map button, and I right click and I select create empty parent, and if I call this parent, as an example, mobile controls, then what I can do is I can turn the parent off and everything turns off, as opposed to just these things. And the other thing I also want to think about is this information button, which has been left out, this info button up here. So it might be somewhere else where I have this info button, but you can see through here, and there might be a control panel button right here that I can also include in mobile controls. So this is the button. Now if I uncheck this, or uncheck the mobile controls, then all of them disappear, and I can use regular controls when it's in WebGL format. Okay, so that's one thing to do. But we have a problem because this orientation is in the middle. These things are on the sides, right? It kind of orients the side. And what we need to do to make this work is under mobile controls, you want to choose that you don't want to stretch, but you want to do this one. Okay. So what this one does, and if you look at in the scene, and if I go to 2D for a second, and if I look at the canvas for 2D, you can see what it's done. Mobile controls is now stretched to fit the entire screen. So this is one thing that's going to happen. Okay, now this is going to affect your layout. So when it comes into place, right, because we want to support different screen sizes. So one thing you can do for your canvas, right, is on the right, or down here where it's this canvas scaler. Right now it's constant pixel size. But what you can do is you can do scale with screen size. And scaling with screen size, what you want to do is give it a reference resolution, right? Remember that the reference resolution that we want to give it is 2560 by 1440, whatever the phone is that you're supporting. So this is the reference resolution we're going to use. So I'm going to use 2560 by 1440 here. And what this will do is realign everything so that it is based on width or height. And what I want is for everything to be 50%. If you put in the match over here to 0.5, that means it'll take the average of your screen width and height to position your phone properly. So what effect does that have on your build? Because you need to make these changes so that it works properly on your build. First of all, let's save everything, right? Let's save everything. And let's produce this for mobile. So let's go File, and let's just do a build and run for now, right? So we're going to target, again, my other player. It's going to do a rebuild, and sometimes this won't take so long because it's doing a incremental build based on the last thing we made, all right? And let's see where it goes now compared to where it went before. Did it go? Is it going to go on my phone, or is it going to go on my emulator? And once this is done, copying my APK, it looks like it's going to go on my phone. Right now, if everything went well, then you should see me be able to control this on my phone. Let's take a look and see what that looks like with our simulator. So here's our simulator here, and let me just uncheck this. And I just want to do one thing. I want to go to my apps. Yeah. Sometimes what happens is I lost connectivity. You lose connectivity from your apps like this, right? So you can just put it on your phone again and see what happens. Let me just try that again. So I'm just going to do this. And let's just go to that app so that it should show, I think it's this one. Actually, let's just deploy again one more time. So file, build and run. Because I didn't have that connection with my with the simulator here, or I'm casting actually. I'm doing screen casting right here, so you can see what I got here when I'm live with you, right? Again, this is part of what we need to do because we want to be able to see what it looks like on a real device as much as possible, because it's going to give us a closer sense of what it's going to look like at the end when you create your game. By the way, if it doesn't run here, but it runs somewhere else, it's also bad. All right, so it's running. Let's see if it's going to run. And yeah, there we are, right? So this is my little device. And now you can see that I can actually do what I want to do here. It's pretty slow. This is pretty slow for me moving, right? So what I want to do is definitely update my my look so that it is using some kind of different way of doing things. Also, this is good, but notice that here, no, it's an actual phone. This is my actual phone now. Notice that this is pretty small, right, compared to last time. And I need to make this bigger, but my jumping works okay. My jumping works, but unfortunately what it is also is when I do this kind of stuff. So if I look down, this is pretty slow. So I've got to update this on my phone. This looks okay. The speed here, I'm looking like it's okay. Maybe even it's a little fast, to be honest with you, but this is a problem. This is a real issue. And this part here, my mini map, is super small on my phone, like super, super small. It's like this big, right? So I want to make my mini map better. It should be repositioned somewhere else, and it should not be here. All right, so that's good. Let's just stop this. We don't want to make it on my phone anymore. So it's actually on my phone. That was on my phone. So I got some differences between my phone and my emulator, and that's what's going to happen, right? So a couple things that we learned from that was in my canvas, the mini map was in the wrong spot. All right, so this is pretty big over here, but if I bring up my mini map, let's show my mini map on my canvas, this one, it's pretty small, right? So what I'm thinking is I probably need to make this at least 1.5 times bigger. So I'm just going to multiply it by 1.5 times, right? And obviously it can't fit anything there anymore because it's going to collide with my buttons. So what I want to do is I'm just going to move this over to the middle, someplace like here. And instead of making it so it's arranged for the top right, I'll make it arranged for the middle, top middle. So that means I'll change my centering or my anchor preset to the top. And what you can also do is make it so that it's going to be a 0. So that's the x-axis, 0, 0. I want to pull this down a little bit so it's going to come to this point. This is where it's going to show up, which clashes with this. But that's okay, because I probably don't want to see my mini map and my little menu at the same time anyway. Okay? It's probably not what I want. So it's going to come back over, and we have to make sure that one doesn't allow the other one to happen. Okay? So a couple things that are going to be changed. So mini map is going to be here, right? And that's the one thing, and it's going to be 1.5 times the size. The other thing that we noticed is that my buttons, so if I look at my jump button, and if I look at my actual text for my jump button, this one, this is good, and this is pretty good. So these are good sizes, if you will, for everything. No problem. Maybe what we want to do is make it bold instead of making it so that it is normal, because I think bold looks a little better than normal in terms of how this looks. So this is pretty good. So a couple additional things here. Okay, let's rebuild. So now instead of going to my phone, I found some new things about my phone. Let's build toward my emulator. So again, I'm going to go to build settings, and I'm going to change from my phone, this is the actual device, to my emulator again. And then let's just build and run and see what that does. Again, I'm doing an incremental build, so theoretically this shouldn't take so long. But let's see what happens. And once we get this into good shape, then I'm going to save this and put it up on GitHub for you. And then we're going to get to the next step, which is doing saving and loading. And how to use scriptable objects in the first place. All right, cool. It's built. Let's see what this looks like on my emulator. And okay, so this is where it's going to be. I want to hide it and show it. That's what's going to come up. What about if I choose the information button? It's going to come down over top. That's pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that anyway. Okay, nice, excellent. And that's what I'm looking at just to see from my emulator build. But what does this look like on my phone? And also what I forgot to do is I forgot to hide my minimap. So let's go back to my canvas, go to my minimap border and hide it by default. And then let's run it again. So file, save project. And then I want to go file, build settings. And this time I want to build towards my phone, my actual device. And then I'm going to do build and run. And then let's see what happens there and what that does differently. Does it look good enough? Is it big enough for me compared to what I saw in the emulator? So again, what I'm using is casting. It's not an emulator or a simulator. The simulator is inside of my editor. That's what I'm seeing when I go to simulator. My emulator is LD player. This is the emulator, which emulates almost exactly what it would be like to run the hardware. Then when I use casting, I'm actually going to use my real phone, my real device, right, to show you what I'm seeing live. This is what you're seeing when I put it here. This is my actual phone that you're seeing, a test phone that I have. And if you notice, if I run it, this is what it actually looks like on my phone now. You're seeing what I see. All right, so again, if I press the B button, I can see that comes on, and that toggles on and off nicely. I can also jump nicely and go back, no problem, right? I can look around, but again, we didn't take care of this problem. I just took care of that one problem, which is, the ability for me to see everything in the emulator. If I press the I button, then my menu comes down, and I'm going to use that menu for saving and loading in a second. Okay, cool. Everything is nice. I like what's happening right now. And let's get back to this. So now the next problem is, I noticed that we had a problem with maneuvering with my right stick. It was too slow. And remember, what I do is I use the mouse look is what I used to use before. So if I go back to my player, and if I look at my player cam has this mouse sensitivity that I'm not using right now. Let's use it. So I'm going to double click on my camera controller. I'm going to bring up my code one day when it comes up. Here it is. If I scroll down, you're going to see that before I was using mouse sensitivity, but now I'm not. I need to use it. I need to multiply this by, it's called mouse sensitivity. I'm going to keep that name for now, but really it's just x-axis sensitivity and y-axis sensitivity and z. So y and x and y-axis sensitivity really just be called control sensitivity or whatever, right? So again, let's try that again. And we can rename it later, right? Instead of, for example, mouse sensitivity, right? What I'm looking for is where it says horizontal and vertical sensitivity, I could change that just to sensitivity. So horizontal sensitivity and vertical sensitivity, I haven't made that work. Let's get rid of those two things. And we'll just use sensitivity or control sensitivity. So rename, so refactor, rename. And we want to call this control sensitivity, right? That's what it is. Yep. And let's change this crazy number from 1,000. Let's change it back to something like that's reasonable. And in testing, guys, I found that something like 2.0 is probably good enough. So something that like this small, 2. And if I go back now, you'll see that horizontal and vertical sensitivity go away, and this control sensitivity goes to 2. Okay, let's redeploy to my phone this time around. So File, Save Project, and I'm going to go and build and run. And this is going to push everything to my mobile device again in an incremental build. So it shouldn't take so long. And then we'll put this up on GitHub, because then you'll have all the settings that I have for the changes that I made, right? Even though the settings, when you download from GitHub, they'll look different than mine, because you have to still choose the other platform for deployment, right? At least you'll have the changes packed into your player settings, which is where you want them. All right, let's see if this continues to finish up. And as we move through here, we're going to go into the next settings, and we should be good to go. And one more second, and let's see if it's actually going to work. Looks like it is, and it looks like this. And now let's see how this looks. Oh yeah, much better. It's like way more responsive, right? So compared to before. Again, it's not totally great, but it's better than what it was before. It's playable now for sure. Maybe what we also want to use is something else, like instead of just regular controls, maybe we want to also support things like inverted look for people who want to use that as a different option. But all this works nicely. The sound works. My mini map works. And if we kind of go forward, and if I scroll through, and if I jump as an example, and let's just go over here to this guy over here. Let's see if he can see us as I'm moving. He should be able to see me now. He's going to kick me, right? But now I'm on the top, and if I want to see where he is, so let's bring up my mini map. You can see that that's where he sees where I am, and I can kind of go down. He's going to follow me, and you can clearly see where he is compared to what I am, and I can run away from him until the next guy is going to show up, and he's going to run after me too. It's not perfect, but again, you can see that that is working okay. He's going to try and kick me off. Yay! Awesome. He kicked me so far off, he kicked me into oblivion. All right, way off the death line. All right, so that is kind of how it works. I think it works a lot better now. Let's file, save project, and let's close off Unity, and let's put it up on GitHub. So again, what I want to do is once Unity is closed, and only then, do I want to go to my command line and go something like git add dot git commit -m, and I'll say updated controls for mobile, and then git push. So that'll push everything up to GitHub, so you'll have all those changes. Let's go back into Unity now and talk about scriptable objects. So let's go back into Unity. I'm going to click this, and let's get back into that. So in the PowerPoint, what I did was way down in the bottom, I started talking about scriptable objects and what they are. And really what they are is a way of creating something called a data container. And the data container is going to be actually used as an asset that sits inside of your project, right? And what you can do is you can make a prefab of the scriptable object. And it's very similar to a singleton, very similar to that. Okay, so scriptable logic can be used for a lot of stuff. For example, in an inventory system where I have a longsword, right? Here's an example of saving data as an asset in my project, right? So these are the three use cases that we have here: saving and storing data during an editor session, inventory systems, quest systems, how to make a quest system, and so on. As well as there's some great little tutorial links that I can recommend that you take a look at if for any additional help. All right, but I'm going to show you how to do this. So now that back in Unity, what I want is under scripts. I could certainly put my scriptable object there, but what I want is I want to think about a data container, a data folder that I have my scriptable objects in. So again, I'm going to right click here on my assets. I'm going to create a new folder. I'm going to call this folder data. Okay, so the data folder. And inside my data folder, I'm going to add in a scriptable object. So the way you work with scriptable objects is you make a new script. So new C# script. And I'm going to make this scriptable object the, for the scene. I want to load and save. So we're going to call this the, and this is just going to be game data or scene data. So we'll call this the scene data scriptable object, screen data scriptable object. Okay. So that's what this is. And if I was to go in there and double click on that, you're going to see it comes up with mono behavior. One thing to note is that scriptable objects are not mono behavior. Mono behavior is the superclass that allows us to attach a script to a game object. This thing here will not be used that way. Okay, it'll be used in a different way. So I'm going to call this scriptable object. And as a result of scriptable object being used, I don't need any of this. There is no start and there is no update function for scriptable objects. It's not a mono behavior. It's something else. Okay. One thing also that we need for scriptable objects is the ability for us to configure them, right? So let's go up on Unity for a second and let's take a look at scriptable objects. Okay, so if I look at scriptable objects Unity on the manual, again, make sure you target the right version. You're going to see an example. And one of the things they have is this little attribute menu right here that tells us to create an asset menu. Let's use this one. So copy this part right here. And what this is going to look like up here is it's going to look like this. Create asset menu. The file name. Okay, what is the file going to be called? It's going to be called scene data. So scene data. My menu name is going to be something like the data that I want to have. Usually I try and make it the same menu as the folder that I'm using. And then some kind of data. So scene data is what you want to have. There's my scene data. Okay. And I don't care about order right now. We can get rid of that. So we can just say something that looks like this. All right. So what do I need to save? What kind of information that I want to save about the scene? Well, I probably want to save things like my player's health, my player's position, my enemy's health, and my enemy's position, right? All those kind of things, like kind of information about the world, the game world, right? And other things like, hey, what about my coins? What about, drops, like things like pickups or that kind of stuff. You can store as many things in here as you want. But let's start off with a couple things. I want to save my player's position, and also my player's health. Those two things. So let's talk about, as an example, so this is player data, right? And in my player data, again, one thing you could do is you can try and separate this. So I can say something like header, and I can say things like player data. So what do I need for my player data? I need my player's position. So I need to have a public transform, right? My public transform's position, right? So for example, which will be the player position, right? As well as a public float or an integer, let's say, with my health. So int, which is my player health. Let's just look at those two objects that I want to save. So I just want to save those two things for now. So I don't care about my enemies right now. I just want to save those two things. And how do I do that, right? All right, well, let's take a look at what I get when I created that. So going back to Unity then, my scene data SO on the right, as an example, it just says I've got my player position. Okay, that's what it does, player position. But I don't have anything right now. This is just my blueprint. Think of it that way. I don't have an actual scriptable object. This is the script for my scriptable object, right? I need to instantiate a new asset that I got to store here on my project, right, to store my data. So where do I do that? What I can do is I can go right-click, and I want to create, and notice the data menu just came up. I never had a data menu before, but now I do. Why? Because of my script that said, hey, create an asset menu called scene data. inside, or my file name is scene data, inside of a menu called data. All right, so data, scene data. So again, if I right click here and I go create data, scene data, right? That is the data that'll be stored. I'm going to make a new asset called scene data. Okay, so we can call this main scene data because this is the main scene. This is where I'm storing my data. Or you can make it so it's the game scene. So it doesn't matter which scene you're in. It'll know. I can store other things like what scene am I in. If I had multiple scenes, I could specify that. I could load a scene that I'm in by saving my information here. But this keeps track of information. Notice what it keeps track of here: player position, as well as player health. Those are the two things that it starts off with, right? So when I press save, I want to save two things. I want to save my player position and my player health. And then when I press load, I want to load up my player position and my player health again. Cool. Let's make a mechanism for loading and saving. So we have a mechanism for pausing the game. It doesn't really work great, but it works. I want to definitely put pause somewhere else. So save, load, and pause. Okay, so let's have a couple of more buttons here that I want to add in. Let's duplicate this button for now. So I'm going to go here and go Control D, just so that we have the same thing. It looks this exact way. I'll make another Control D, so two more buttons. One button is going to be called the load button. Another one will be called the save button. So I got load and save buttons here. It needs to be showing up here. I'm going to click the save button first. Actually, load button should be load, save, and then pause, right? Pause at the bottom. So load should be higher up. So I'm going to grab the menu here and put it up higher. Let's say up here. And let's just change what it says here from pause, it doesn't even look right, to save. And I'm going to fix these things now that we have a chance to look at them again. So this will be called save. I think that the menu itself, the actual button, is pretty small compared to what I'm getting to loop in there. So it looks like it's 36 for the font size, but my button is only 30, and that's why it looks the way it does. Let's make my button 50, so it's a little bigger than what it was before, and I think that's better for all of them. So let's just change the buttons for my save button and my pause button. Let's make the height 50, okay? Let's move my pause button down, and there's my save button right here. My save button should actually say save, right? So let's change that. We'll say save. Okay, so this will be load up here, the load button, instead of save. All right, and I'm just positioning it here relative to, now notice it says the middle, right? That's my anchor. But think about what I really want to do. If this changes size, I want to position this thing so it positions the load button at the top. So I'm going to put the load button at the top. The pause button should be positioned at the bottom. And the save button should be positioned in the middle, right? So it's always in the middle of the screen. So that should be 0, 0. My load button should be some amount below my top part. Let's make it something even, and we'll make the same thing on the bottom for the bottom part. Let's start with the bottom because the bottom has this extra piece here, right? So I probably want to put the bottom something like this, like where it is right now, which is like 65, or let's say 70 from the top, from the bottom. If I put it 70 from the top, from the bottom, I want to put 70 from the top. So let's see what that looks like from the top. So I go to load, and then I want to put that minus 70 from the top. So now it's a little bit more balanced than what it was before. And these buttons look pretty boring, right? Like they're white buttons on a background. We can make them different colors too if we really want to, something that matches with the game, you know, as an example. But for now, we're going to leave them as boring as they are. All right, a couple of things though for my load button. My load button click event cannot be this, because right now it uses pausable, which is my pausable toggle pause, right? So it says pausable script, and I use toggle pause to do that. That's what the name of the function is. And pausable, where is that held? That's in my control panel. My control panel has a control panel script, control panel controller, And then on the canvas, right, where is that pausable script? Is it on the pausable button? Where is it? Because there is a script that gives us pausable. So if I look at scripts, and if I look inside scripts, there's something called pausable, right? So where is this script? Because I need to have something that's in there. Is it in the game controller maybe? Let's take a look at that game controller. Game controller has a soundtrack. That's all it has. So that's not it. How about ground? Ground doesn't do much, it's just a ground, right? So enemies, you know what? These enemies are floating free around. I'd like to put these enemies as part of a superclass. Let's make a parent class for these. So I'm going to right click and I'm going to do create empty parent for those two. We're going to call these enemies so we can put them inside of a parent, and we can also kind of hide what they look like, right, if I want to. I got pillars, I got tiles, I got a spawn point, I got a death plane, and I got pausable. All right, there's pausable. So pausable is a separate game object where my pausable script is on, right? All right, we don't want this. This is nice, but if I look at my pausable script, right now it does two things. It looks like all objects kind of in my code. I use pause and save. That's okay. But I want my other buttons, my load and save button, to be somewhere else. Something like a control panel or a game controller. So game controller right now does not have any script. Let's add a script on top of game controller that allows me to save and load. So some kind of, or again, another good place for that would be the control panel controller. Control panel controller, which not just creates controls the control panel, but also maybe has additional information about loading and saving, right? So that might be something I want to put in here as well. Okay, because right now I have one, which is on control button pressed. Hey, maybe I can put all the buttons pressed for my control panel to make this go. So we can put it here as well. So I think we should put it here. So let's make two public events. So public void, and we'll say on load button pressed. Okay, and we also need a public void on save button pressed. Now remember what we need. We need a couple of pieces of information here that we don't have right now. We need the information to be passed. And let's see what we have right now. We have a rect transform, we have off-screen position and on-screen positions. And we have our camera controller, which is our player camera, and something called pausable, okay? So that's what we have, a pausable that kind of turns on and off. So it kind of refers to the pausing thing. We have our player camera, which is find object of type camera controller, all right? That's what we want. And I also want access to my player, all right? My player. So again, we've just put a bunch of stuff in here in my control panel, but one thing I want is my player. So let's put in another little thing here. We'll call this a header for player settings. So player settings, we have our player camera as well as our player public. And it's going to be of type player controller or player behavior. Okay. So notice that was the player behavior that we're using. So player behavior is what we want to make it of. And we're going to call this player. The player and the player camera is separate. Now, if we have the player, the way I'm finding the player controller, my player camera is I'm saying, hey, find object of type in the scene that's called camera controller. All right. Well, similarly for my player behavior, I want to do the same thing. I want to say that the player is equal to find object of type player behavior. And I want to get reference to that. So I got my player behavior and I got my camera controller. Player behavior and camera controller. All right. We want this because remember the player itself. So if I go back to the scene and if I go back to the player behavior, my player behavior has a bunch of things. one thing it has is max speed and movement and joystick and all this other stuff, as well as it also has things like my health bar and my health, which is right here. Okay, so I can say public health and get health from my player behavior. And I can also get my transform position. All right, so that is what my control panel .cs is going to get. Cool. So then, when I save, let's do the save button first, which is easiest, okay? When I click the save button, I also need access to the scene data SO. So let's go up here to the top where I have pausable, and I'm also going to have another section here. We'll call this header scene data. And under scene data, we're going to make a public reference to the scene data SO. So scene data SO, which SO means scriptable object. We'll just call this scene data. For this, what I want is for me to make a reference to the scene data file. So the easiest way to do this is in the control panel under the scripts here. I want to drag and drop the scene data SO in here. I can also find it, but it's more challenging. So I'm going to go into data. I'm going to drag and drop this thing, this little asset we made, which is main scene data, and drag it into here. So scene data is something that we have as an asset. Right now, scene data is empty. Take a look. All right, cool. So I want to click save and load and load. Let's see what that does. So again, I'm going to save the scene and save my project and go back to my script. Okay, cool. So now that I have my scene data as a reference, what I want to do is when I press on the save button, I want to say scene data dot, and notice that it has player health and player position. Player position is equal to the transform of my player behavior. So I'm going to say player dot transform dot position. That's what I want to save. The player transform dot position. But when I do this, player, right? If I go to transform, if I just say transform, right? That gives me the transform. So I'm actually taking the entire transform, including, so this is not player position actually. If I go back to my scene data SO, I'm getting a whole transform, which means rotation, position, rotation, and scale somehow, right? I mean, rotation is really good so that I'm looking in the right direction when I'm getting whatever my direction was before. I want to get that again. But my position is just a vector 3. So really, this is really it's not named right. So let's just do it again. So I'm going to rename this. So refactor rename to player transform. Player transform. Okay. But what I need to do, because I've rejigged my scene data SO, what I need to do here is I need to make a new asset. This asset here is not going to be correct. Let's just remake it. So let's delete this. Let's make a brand new asset. So right click, create, data, scene data. We're going to call this main scene data like we did before. And inside of my control panel, let's just drag and drop that again. Okay, there we go. Main scene data. So now it's showing my player transform. Player transform. All right, so this is a player transform. So I'm going to say that. So I'm going to say that inside of my control panel, then I'm going to say that the scene data player transform is equal to the player dot transform. The whole transform is going to be saved over there. And the next thing I want to do is I want to say scene data dot player health is equal to player dot health. Notice how clean that is. So I'm basically saving it to this thing. Now remember, what I want to see is that this works actually on Android. Who cares if it works on desktop or in the editor? All right, so that's my save button. And let's see if this works. Let's test it first in the editor, and then let's see what happens when we load our scene again, right? So again, save, and I want to press play. Okay, cool. And how do I test it in the editor? Well, I need to press this button. So it comes down, load, save, and pause. That's how it's going to look. and I want to click save. And then it gives me this null reference error. Okay, let's see what happened and what happened. What did it do? Okay, so it says null reference error, object reference not set to an instance of an object under something called pausable. So it says pausable, right, for each script, right, that is paused. It's looping through, and it's trying to find something to pause when I did that. Oh man, I didn't do it right. I didn't finish it. Let's finish it. So that's wrong. What I want to instead do with the save, instead of it being pausable, it needs to be the other things. So saving and load use different things. It uses the control panel, right? Hold on a second. I'll tell you in a second. So I need to take the control panel and drag it in there. And I need to do the same thing in the function for the save button. I need to choose control panel controller, and under control panel controller, the on save button pressed event. And the same thing goes with my load button. My load button can't be the pausable menu. I need to drag and drop my control panel in there. And now I can select my control panel controller, and I can select my on load button pressed. Pausable, which is going to be my pause button, is still going to use my pausable object. And for that, I need to kind of drag and drop my pausable game object in there. That's what it needs to be. And then from there, I need to choose my pausable toggle pause method. That's what has to happen. Now, notice that that didn't do much. And we're going to talk about what is the problem with this thing in a second. So let's run it again. And we're just testing locally before we put it up remotely. I'm going to click on this button, and I'm going to click save. Okay, so that's great. What did it do, Tom? Let's take a look at my main scene data. Main scene data now shows my health as 100 and type mismatch. Okay. Player transform and a transform aren't doing what it's supposed to do. Okay, well, let's see what that does. So let's go back to my scripts and see what happened. What did I do wrong? Again, I'm doing this all way before I do it on mobile. Okay, so let's take a look at my scene data SO. Scene data SO says I need a public transform called player transform. That is actually a transform. Okay, cool. But what happens when I go to try and do that with my control panel controller? It says, so player transform is equal to the player.transform. And this should be what it is. But player is a behavior, right? My player is a behavior, not the player object itself. It's not a game object. So again, you know, if we want to try and see what this is, let's take a look at what my player transform is. It doesn't even exist. So a good way of checking this is a debug log, where I do the player.transform. Let's take a look and see what that gives me. Okay. Let's try again. So again, I'm going to run it, and I'm going to press the little button here. It's going to bring up a menu. I'm going to click save, and then it says that it should be a Unity engine.transform. That's what I'm getting. Okay. But then how come when I look at my main scene data SO, it says type mismatch? It should just be this, player's transform, right? Player transform. Well, here's the issue, right? Player behavior is here, okay? And player behavior is not the player game object itself. It's a behavior, it's a script. So maybe what I mean is I want to get the player's game objects transform. Maybe that'll work. Let's try that next. So scene data player transform. We want to get the game object, so player.gameObject.transform. Okay, maybe that's what I want. Okay. And let's try that next. So again, I want to go here and play, and I want to bring up this menu, and we click save. And what does it look like when I look here? It says type mismatch. What? Why? Well, the secret is here. If I was to try and drag and drop, see that it says that it's a problem? In fact, if I choose this and it looks for something that I'm looking at, it just doesn't allow it. It doesn't allow me to save a transform like that. Okay, what about a ground? Or what about, the game controller? Or what about my enemies? Or what about anything? All of them should have player transforms. So why is it that when I go to my script scene data SO, my public transform doesn't work? Why is that? Transform, player transform. Huh? My player health worked, but not my transform. Okay, let's change this. Instead of a transform, let's go with a vector 3, because we have a vector 3. And now we'll rename this thing. So refactor, rename. Let's try something else. Let's refactor, rename to a player position like we wanted before. Okay, here's player position. Save the scene. Let's get rid of the object because this object doesn't compute anymore because we have to make a new one. Right? So no more objects. Okay. And also inside of my scene in my control panel controller, I get my player. Yes, it is true, but now I want my player.transform .position is what I want. Here's my position of my player, saved to my player position. Okay, cool. Right, that's the difference right now. So instead of my whole transform, I'm saving my position. And okay, that's cool, but I need some kind of object. Let's make it. So I'm going to create a new data, scene data. I'm going to store it as, look, now it shows me my position. And it actually shows me what it is, X, Y, and Z. That looks promising. And let's see what happens if I go to control panel and then drag and drop it in here. So take my main scene data, drag and drop it in there. I have a reference to it, save. And then let's run the game and see what happens now. So cool. And I press this on and I click save. And let's see what happens when I get my scene data now. That's much better. So that gives me my actual position of my health. Okay, and if I make it go away, and if I move my guy back, right, take a look at this, and if I pull up my health, or my position and save, saves my current position in the file, right? All right, so this is where I was last time, up here. I want to load from where I am here, not in there, where I was before. Cool. Let's see if we can make it load properly, okay? Just like we did before, we saved nicely with a single piece of data. But what about loading? So loading is, okay, scene data, right, dot player position. Okay, that's what I want to get from. And I want to load it into my player.transform.position, right? Well, that's going to equal to my scene data.player position, right? Uh-oh, there's a problem here. We know that the player is governed, right, by my character controller. Remember? Character, player. If I look at player, it has a character controller. And I cannot just flash it somewhere else. Character controller has a different thing. So if I go to controller, right, player controller dot, and I want to change position. Remember, I have the move and I have a simple move. So move, by simple move, it says, hey, add speed. So what I need to do is, remember what I need to do? I need to disable it. So I want to enabled is equal to false. So I disable the player controller first. I modify its position, and then I enable it again. I need to do that. So I disable it, just like I did with my death plane. I disable it, I reposition the player, I enable it. And then I assign the player's health. So player health is equal to scene data dot player health. And let's just make a change. Notice, by the way, that my scene data health, I just want to point this out, my main scene data is modifiable in the editor. Let's suppose my player's health was only 100. From 100, it went to 60, okay? Now remember, even though I changed my player's health and I modified directly this way, my player behavior says that if I modify my health, right? If I modify my health, there is no, it won't know that I have to change what my health bar. My health bar won't change. So notice I have a take damage. And basically what I'm saying is, hey, here's my health. Whatever my health is, take damage. Okay? But I don't have a mechanism of modifying my health bar directly. I'm going to say, well, unless I said health bar, take damage, right? Here's my health bar, right? Health bar, take damage is a thing. Let's go back to my health bar scene scrape controller. Let's go to that, go to definition. Right now, the only thing we have is take damage and reset. Take damage and reset. Okay. What about if I just want to set health? That is another thing that I would do. The different kind of function. Let's add that in because I know I need that. So public void set health to whatever an integer health value is that I need, right? That is a different thing than taking damage. That's like a one-shot deal where I want to set the health to whatever, right? So I want to say that the health bar slider dot value is equal to the health value. I want to set it to that right away, just like we did down here. Wherever the health value I set in, that's the one. And I also want my current health, right? My current health is also going to be equal to my health value. So that's something that I want. So that's a mechanism for me to be able to set the health bar, whatever I want, by setting a value, all right? Because I didn't have that before. So that's something I need to change. Okay, cool. Let's go back to the player behavior now. So player behavior, not only will I set the health, but I also want to set the health bar value. So I want to go back to my control panel controller. And when I set the player's health, I also want to set the health bars set health, right thing, right? Because that's the way I've set it up right now. So I'm going to say that, hey, player.health bar dot set health to whatever the player scene data dot player health is. I want to set it to that. All right. So that way I want to do that when I load up. When I load up, I set everything to where it's supposed to be. And that modifies the value. Okay. So save data does one thing. It's pretty simple, but load data, there's more work to be done. Okay. All right. Let's check this and see what happens. So now, cool. I set the health to 60. And remember that health bar is 100 right now. And if I play the game, right, it kind of broke. And it kind of is trying to look at all the scripts in the scene, right? That's what it's trying to do. And it's looking through each script in the scene and try to basically disable them. Okay, that's how it's working right now for pausing. Okay. And it's almost like I want to stop all the game objects from working, right? But there's other scripts in the scene now, right? There's other kind of scripts. It's not just a regular script anymore. So script is a mono-behavior script. But there's other mono-behavior scripts that I don't want, right? So I don't want just mono-behavior scripts because one thing is it stops the agent from working. So I can turn off the agent itself, the agent script. But what about other scripts? I want those scripts to be turned off too. That's what this thing. For now, let's just comment this out. All right, just to see what the effect is going to be if I pause my game in another way. So again, is game paused, cool. And then let's see what happens if I try that again. So I run it and I press the menu button to come up and I press pause. And then it says, okay, whoa. It says unassigned reference variable agents. Look at this. Of pausable has not been assigned. Okay. Just want to point this out to you. Variable agents of pausable has not been assigned. Okay, what does that mean? So for every agent in agents, agents is here. Here's a list of agents. Okay, and this is an effect of what happened last time because remember that each agent is my enemies. These are agents. And I don't find them in any way. It's not like I find all my agents, right? I just I'm expected to add them on, right? So that is an issue. Same thing with scripts. That's why I wasn't finding scripts in the past. There's no mechanism for me to find my agents or find my scripts. So I want to find everything that has nav mesh agent in it and add it on, right? So I want to say that agents then in start is equal to all of my agents. For each agent in my agent, I want to get a list of that and then convert it to a list, right? So what it does is I want to say find objects of type, find objects of type, and I want to find object of type nav mesh agent. So find all those objects, right? That's what I want to find. Find objects of type nav mesh agent. And then what is this going to return? It returns a, so just to show you what this does, let's just put this in its own line. If I do this find objects of type, and this is okay, but what does it return, right? It returns a navigation mesh agent. This one returns a nav mesh agent array. A nav mesh agent array, but I'm looking for a list. Is there a toList method? toList is what I want. So I want to be able to convert this to a list, right? This is what it's returning now, which is a list of nav mesh agents, which is now going to be agents. Agents is equal to a list of nav mesh agents. I converted my array to a list. By the way, you can go the other way around. I can convert my list to an array by a toArray. That's like C# 101. All right, let's see if that works. So again, going back, I'm doing one thing at a time, and I want to make my saving and pausing loading. That was a bug from before. So if I run it now, and I bring it up, and then I click pause, that means that all nav mesh agents have paused. And the way to check that is, if I go to my enemy, then down here, you can see that nav mesh agent has been unchecked. Look at that. No more nav mesh agent. Okay, cool. So that's one, but now it's more difficult. So I want to do the other ones too. Nav mesh agents doesn't really stop anything from happening. That just takes away the nav mesh agent itself. So that's one thing I want to change. But I also want to take away any scripts that I load. That's going to be more difficult because for me to find scripts, that's any script, right? And that's not what I want. I just want my navigation. I want to be able to stop my player from moving, right? So I need to add my player script to that. And I need to add all of my agents scripts, my enemy scripts. So remember that I can do it manually. I can say that scripts, right, dot add, and for every object, for every enemy that's inside there, let's do that. So I can say I want to find a var, a temporary, a number of, I want to almost do a for each. So for every, and I'm gonna call this a collection of agents. I'm gonna say find objects of type, for every enemy behavior, right? For any object that has enemy behavior on it, find objects of type enemy behavior. For every one of those, for every enemy in enemy behavior, well, I want to turn their script off too. I want to say that I want to add inside of my scripts, I want a scripts.add the enemy. So that's going to be something that I want to add in. That's the script that I want to add in to the scripts that I want to control, that I want to turn off, right? Similarly, after I've done this, I also want to add in my script for my player. My players should not work. So remember that my player behavior is also something that I want to turn off, player behavior, all right? So I can manually control that. So under pausable, I can say that scripts.add, and I want to add my player behavior on it, all right, as well. So I want to say find object of type player behavior. Oh, man. Player behavior. Let's try that again. Whew. find object of type player behavior and add that in. So the player behavior script's got to be added in. I also want to find a script that says camera controller. Add that in too. So scripts.add, again, find object of type camera controller. Right, I want to add that in there too. Because camera controller and player behavior should be shut off. I shouldn't have any of those, but everything else should be functional. I should be able to still pause and save. I should be able to press my buttons to make them turn on and off, right? You know, those kind of things. I should be able to do that. And this is where my other controller functions, like the on-screen controls, should still be functional. All right, so now I can go back and put this back. And let's see if that works now. So again, let's just toggle that on. Oops. There we go. That's toggled back in. And now we can run it again and see if that works. So again, I can press play. And when I press this button, it comes up. Let's take a look at the pausable. There's my pausable. Notice I have scripts. Here's my scripts. And notice that there are automatically, I get a couple of things here. I get my player behavior and my player camera, right? And one thing that didn't get added in here, right? There's these two slots in here for something else. So that is for any other behavior that I want. I want to add in a mono behavior for my my enemies. So here's my enemies. Somehow my enemy behavior, which is right here, it's actually called crypto behavior, right? Not enemy behavior. All right, let's go back in there. That was a mistake. Let's go back. So it's called the crypto behavior, not enemy behavior. I don't know what possessed me, but it's actually crypto behavior. Crypto behavior. Crypto behavior. There we go. So for every crypto behavior enemy in crypto behavior, then make a new enemy, add the enemy in. Let's try that again. So remember, the enemy is a type of script that controls crypto behavior, is what it's called. That's the way I called it. All right, so let's try that again. So before I even pause anything, if I look at my pausable, you can see now I have my enemy, two enemies, a player, and my player behavior in twice. What the heck? How did I add my player behavior in twice when I have a bunch of them in here? So if I uncheck this, well, my bad. I actually had some stuff in here before, and that's why there's remnants in here. Let's just delete all this stuff, so because we're finding it automatically now. I'm pointing this out because this is like issues. Same thing with agents. I want to get rid of these things too. So let's get rid of those, and we should automatically find agents now, right? It shouldn't be able to make agents, right? I shouldn't have them here. It should find them for me, which is good. Let's try that again. So run it, and now, yes, this is good, and yes, this is good. So now it finds everything automatically, and I don't have to drag and drop. If I had more enemies here, I wouldn't want to list all the enemies. I'm only ever going to probably have one player, so that's okay. But the enemies, they should be automatically found for me, and especially the enemy nav mesh. Nav mesh is something that I want to be able to turn on and off if I want to, right? All right, cool. So now if I press the I key, take a look at this, is game paused. If I press pause, then is game pause is true. That means if I try and move around, none of these controls will work. Well, that actually made a noise, but I'm not actually doing anything, right? So I can't show or hide anything. This shouldn't work. So this is interesting. These two things, where are they that I can make a noise? That shouldn't be able to do that because I should have disabled them, right? Let's check. So player, if I go back down to here, player behavior is actually unchecked, which is cool, right? A little bit of a bug there. And player behavior has everything else. All right, cool. So that is why this is still making noise. Liam, I'll go back there in a second. I'm just showing you this part first. And then if I click in my player pausable, if I click unpause, now you can see that all that other stuff worked. I can still pause. I can bring up the mini map and turn it off, right? But as soon as I press pause, then nothing works. Okay, so pausing works. Okay, and what about loading? Loading teleports me to where I am, and I'm still paused. Look, I'm still paused. So one thing we need is a message that tells us that we're paused, because right now I can't tell. I have no idea that I'm actually paused or not. Okay, so that's something we also need. And Liam, I'm going to show you the stuff in a second. Let's stop this now, and let's go back into the script, and I'll show you that stuff. So again, so let's go into my, so pausable is just this. I just fixed this part because this was broken. Okay. But what I need is the control panel controller, and this is what you're looking for, Liam. So on control panel press, that brings up the toggle control. On load button press, that brings up the load button. And on save button press, that makes the save button work. So these are the things that make everything work. All right, this is pretty good. Liam, is that good? You got everything now? Liam, you there? Are you good? Fran says get component parent transform. I could have done that too. All right, so hopefully you got this, Liam. Let's continue. All right, so now that I've got this working, I need, okay, good, thank you. What I need now is just a little bit of a, some kind of thing that shows me that I'm loaded or if I'm paused or not, right? So there's a strategy here. One strategy is that when I bring my button down, this button down here, I also bring a label that's outside of this button or inside of this panel somewhere that says the state of the game. Is it paused or saved? And, I should probably show something like game paused. It might be an animation where it kind of blinks or something like that. That shows me the label. So there's a couple of ways to do this. One way is to have a separate label that's in the scene already that I turn on. So when I'm paused, I just turn on that label that shows it. Or when I bring the label into play, so again, when I run this game, and if I press the little button that comes on, then it brings the label in with it. It's invisible, but as soon as I press pause, then the pause will come up, or maybe a big pause button, a big pause label will come on top of everything else that says game pause, something where I can pause and unpause it, right? It's got to be somewhere where it kind of goes over my controls or someplace in there that shows me that I'm paused. Okay. So a couple strategies. So one strategy is that I make it part of this. Okay, here's something. What if, and I'm just going to put it out there, if I go into the control panel, so in my canvas, in my control panel, which is off right now, right? I'm going to add a new UI, text mesh pro. Let's add one in. Here it is. But instead of being, and I'm going to make this so that it's called the pause label or game state label, right? Here's my game state label. My game state label is going to be centered on the bottom of my screen. So wherever the bottom of my screen is. And I want to take it so it's outside of my panel. Can I do that? So it's just relative to my panel. Wherever my panel is, so too is this thing going to appear. All right. So right now, it's kind of at the top, right? And why is this good? Because that means that even if my panel's not showing, it's going to show my label. Let's make it so that it is, I'm going to make it so that it is the size of my panel, like this. And we'll make it so that it is centered, like so. And then it'll say game paused. And we'll have to make it in a bold kind of color. With maybe what we want to do is we can change a couple of things here. You can make it so that it flashes with some special text. I'm not going to do that here. But something that shows the state of the game. Basics, it should at least do something like this, okay? And what I want is for me to make this so that it's bigger than this. Let's make it so that's, I don't know, it's like 50. Which means that my height of my label should probably be like 70. All right, and I also want to make it so that it is not just centered horizontally, but also vertically. Okay. And maybe some kind of, remember, you can do a lot of really cool things with our style, right? Right now, we can specify a style size, an H1 size like this, game pause, right? Or an H2 size, something that looks like this. It actually has some preset settings, right? There's game 3, which gives me a different kind of look and feel to it. So this is a text style that's built in. C1, there's game pause. C2, take a look if you like these settings. And these are just presets that you can kind of select, right? Links, so you can make it look like a link. You can make it look like a title, right? I can make it look like a quote, whatever it's going to look like, whatever I want, okay? These are the basics. And H1 is something that looks like this. All right, so let's make it look more like an H1, right? But if it's an H1, it's pretty big. So where it says game state label, right, we can reduce the size. By the way, we can also make it so that the game state label, it uses the size from a wrapping perspective of kind of the best size, auto size. So it kind of fits. Whatever the size is, it'll auto size it into the right space right there. What we also want to do with this is I also want to make it invisible. So inside of my game state label, I want to turn it off. So by default, it's up. Now I need to make a reference to it inside of my control panel, right? That's pretty simple. So again, under my control panel, I'm going to go into the control panel script. And I want a public reference to my, because it's my control panel, some kind of label. Let's just put it in the bottom here. So I'll say public. And by the way, it is a Text Mesh Pro object. So we're going to have to say something like using Unity Engine .tmp is what I want. So Text Mesh Pro, right? Because Text Mesh Pro won't come up by default. So how do I get a TMP? Is it enough that I put Unity UI? And if I put a Text Mesh Pro, so public Text Mesh Pro as an example, or TMP label is what I want, or text element, TMP text. Right, here it is, TMP text. Notice it says TM Pro comes up, right? So Text Mesh Pro text. And I'm going to put in what this is, which is my scene state, or did I call it game state label? Probably call it game state. So game state label. And we'll say with lowercase g. Right, there it is. So TMP text. And if I click on game state label now, or control panel, it's looking for a game state label down here. So if I drag and drop my game state label, does it work? That's a good indicator. If I can drag and drop it, that means it's the right type. Cool, right? So that's what this is, game state label. And right now, by default, it's off. But what I want to do is when I toggle my control panel, right? If is on screen, then my player camera enabled is equal to false, and my player camera enabled is equal to true if I'm on screen. And what I want to do is I want to enable my my stuff if it's true, right? Also, move control panel up and down, right? If pausable is game pause, then pausable.toggle pause, right? I'm just looking at this as an example. So where can we put it? Where do you think we should put this thing? So where it says pausable, right? And where I have two things. There's something called a pausable, right? And if pausable, let's take a look at that go-to definition for pausable. So if is game paused, then I'm toggling pause, right? I'm toggling pause. So toggle pause is going to return nothing. It returns void right now. But we can be smart. We can say that. I can also say pausable is game paused. I can check for that. If pausable is game paused, then if pausable is not game paused, then right. But that's what I want. I want to make it so that when I'm pressing the control panel and I show if I press the button, my control panel is going to, depending on update, it doesn't matter if it's on screen or not. If it's paused, it's going to show the button. It's going to show the text mesh pro. So I'm going to say if, right? And again, I'll say toggle pause. So it's just this thing here. It's this toggle or pausable. We'll say pausable. Again, it's a weird name. Pausable dot is game paused. Only if it's that, then I want to show it, but I don't want to. I want to do it. But then I would make an if else. And really, what I want to do is, depending on if it's game pause or not, then if it's true, then I want to show it. So that means that I want to say that my game state label dot enabled, right, is equal to pausable dot is game paused. If the game is paused, then my game state label is enabled, right? If the game is not paused, then my game state label is not enabled. Let's see if that works. So it's not enabled. We press play, right? And then we press this on, and I press pause. Oh man, where is it? How come my game state label isn't on? Let's just turn it on and see what happens. Can I turn it on? Well, my pause, okay, so that's cool. So I can turn it on, but as soon as I go up, look at that. Look what happens. If I go here and if I go back up, it goes away, right? Well, that is because when I go push this up again, it's no longer paused. That's the effect we made when we do this. We can't pause the game and leave this off. When it's off, it's not paused anymore. Okay, well, what happened here? How come if this is down, then I want to show the label? All right, so maybe that's what I want. So if is on screen, how about we try that? So move control panel down if it's on screen. If not, turn it off. Well, let's put that in there. I'll say something like, I mean, this is kind of weird, but okay. Let's try this. We'll say that game state label dot enabled is equal to true. Okay, and then if not, if it's not down and if it's up, then game state label dot enable is equal to false, because either way it's the same, right? So what's the problem here? Is this even going to work? What's happening? And let's check it out. So let's take a look at this. So it's off. I push it down and it should be on, but where is it? Well, let's take a look at our scene for a second. It's here, but I can't see it. How come I can't see it? Well, why is that? Well, because this is off. This game state label is off. Not this is enabled. This is disabled, right? So even this is off. It doesn't matter, right? It's this is off, not this is off. It's not my text mesh pro label. It's my object, my game object that I want. So going back up here to this, it's not a TMP. I'm not modifying my label. I don't need this. That was a nice idea, but no. What I need instead is a game object, which is my game state label. And when my game state label is on, well, I don't want it to be on when it's down, because that immediately says that I'm paused automatically, right? So this is wrong. Let's go back to what we had before. What I want instead is whatever it is, so game state label dot set active, right, is if my pausable is game paused. Otherwise, if it's not paused, it won't show it. Okay, let's see if this one works. Okay, boom, boom, boom. And press play. So we can see that it's off. Oh. We can see that it's off, but my dragging and dropping for my control panel is the wrong type. Game state label should be game state label. Let's try that again. So I don't like doing dragging and dropping. I like finding. Okay, so it comes down and pause. Yay, but oh man, it's neat and all, but it'd be nice if I had a background too. Something that comes up that shows me I'm paused. And if I unpause, it kind of turns off. At least it does show it if I'm paused or not paused. That's a success. But I think that what I think I might want to do more is that there might be a panel that I want to put it in instead. So one thing to notice about the control panel, it has an image, which is of type panel. So let's add a control panel to it. So another little control panel that's part of the control panel. And then I'll surround it. I'll put my game state label inside of it. So let's try that. So we'll say, let's add a new UI panel to it. And I want to make it so that I can move the UI panel down in here. Okay. And let's resize it so we can make it so that it's the size of my, let's bring up my game state label for a second. There's my game state label. And let's just make it, I'm just going to see if I can size this thing so that my, my panel, right, which is, it's going to be the same size as my label, right, that comes up. And I want to make it so that my panel, my label is a child of my panel. So game state label, child of my panel. And we can make it so that the panel itself is slightly less, you know, kind of what this is. So we don't have to make it so it's 100. Let's make it so it's even less than this. So something like, I don't know, 60, just a little bit of background is what I want here, right? And my game state label can stay on now. So that always can stay on, but my panel can go off. So my panel turns off, right? And my panel itself, this panel has to have a reference to the bottom of this thing. This is where it's going to be. My game state label, that's different. That has to be in the middle now because that's the middle of the panel, this other panel that I have, another little division. Okay, that comes up. Nice, nice. And what I want is, you know, for the game panel to come in, not the game paused state, not the actual text, but the panel. Well, that's okay because what I can do in my control panel is down here where it says game state label, I can just drag the panel. So this will be game state panel. Game state panel, just so we know what that is. And in my control panel, I can take my game state panel and drag and drop it in to this. And in my code, we should rejig it so it doesn't say game state panel label. It should say game state panel. So we're just going to rename it. We're going to have to redo it again anyway. So we're just going to refactor rename to game state panel or element. We'll say element, whatever the element is. It could be a panel, it could be a label tomorrow, whatever. And my gameplay element is, or my game state element is going to be active if the game is active, if the game is paused. Okay. And let's see if that messed up. If I rename, sometimes it rejigs this. So I have to drag and drop it again one more time. There we go. And then let's press play now and see what happens. Let's see if that looks better. So I bring it up and I pause, and now you can see it's a little bit better because it comes up with a little bit of a backing. It shows that we're paused. It's just that it's the text is no good. I don't like the green text, so that's okay. Let's change the green text to something that is a little bit better. And one thing that we have is H1 is a style. You can choose all kinds of crazy stuff here. Like if you want to outline it with a black, so I want to outline it with a black color, I can do that now. So it's outlined in black, right? So let's go back to that. So there's my outline. I can also put an underlay like we had there as well. I can have all kinds of other stuff here. Let's put a thickness for my outline of 1, no, of 0.1, or even lower. Let's see if I can go lower than 0.1. 0.05. Oh yeah, that's good. And that's nice there, right? And let's try that again. That looks a lot nicer than before. And if I click it on and then I say pause, okay, that is kind of better, but not quite. See, I'm still playing with it, right? And let's try it again. So again, go here. It's just tricky. I think maybe 0.1 might be good enough. And is it bold? I did put bold, and it is the right way. Yeah, I think let's try that. I'm not sure if I like the green. Maybe it's just the green thing that's bugging me. That might be good enough. All right, so that is what comes up. The game paused. At least I can see it now, and it's got a bit of a backing, so it shows what it is, and I can clearly see that it comes up and it's stopped or not. All right. Poof. Right. And if I load, I'm way out here. And if I save somewhere else, so if I move somewhere over here, let's just put it here. Oops. There, I want to save there, and let's save on top. So I want to kind of, maybe save over here, and let's turn around. Oop, it's way more sensitive in my controller. So something where I'm looking at this thing, so I can see that it's totally different. Now remember, I'm not saving rotation. I'm just saving location. So if I click save now, and then I stop the game. So I start, whatever, and I start again. So I start again. I start in my normal location by default. But if I bring up my panel and click load, then I'm loaded, but I'm facing the wrong way because, yes, it took my thing, but it didn't take my rotation. Okay, cool. Didn't do my rotation. Let's try that again, and let's also save that in my thing. But for now, because we've done a lot, let's say file, save project, right? And let's put this up and so we can try it on an emulator. So I'm going to say file, build settings, and I'm going to go to my emulator first. So see that if the emulator doesn't work, then it's not going to work on my device. All right, so let's try the emulator first. Let's build and run on my emulator. Lots of little changes I made for controls and everything else, loading and saving, and my scriptable object. And this should be a good example of everything that works. And if it doesn't work, it's going to give us a bit of an error. Okay, let's see what the error is looking like. So clickety clack. It says, I got a little error. It says, Unity Engine Windows. What the heck is this? That is definitely an issue. I don't know what happened there. Where did that come from? Right? That must have been something I was fooling around when I was doing all kinds of crazy stuff. I didn't know what that meant. Woof, that was weird. Clear. All right, let's try that again. So build and run. Hopefully that doesn't come up again. If there's another error, we'll see, right? That was just me fooling around. All right, it's doing its conversion. You're probably going to see me spark out a little bit. Also, it gives me a warning. It says, warning, using more than one pixel light on a mobile device. That might be bad, right? Let's try that out. All right, so I'm opening it up. All right, here I am. I want to go back way over here, and then I want to bring up my menu, and I want to load. Okay, it loaded my last known position. Okay, cool. That was what it was loaded. All right, cool. And it give me my health and all that kind of stuff. What about if I save now? Can I save to a mobile device? Okay, I want to go over here, and I want to go here, and here's where I am. I want to save this, and I want to pause. Game pause comes up nicely. It looks nice. And I want to, basically go back. This is where I saved. So let's unpause the game. Let's go back over here and maybe go in there and see what happens. Does it go into that position where I'm facing this AI? So I press load, and yeah, there's my AI. I'm back to where I was before. Wherever I loaded or saved, that's where I'm facing. All right, that's where I'm actually looking at. Okay, so I'll bring this back up again, and I can play it like normal. I can look around and move in there. Let's move in this way. And let's try it again. I'm gonna kind of load, and it didn't change my facing. So wherever I'm looking, it still looks in that direction. And that's not what I want, but it did load exactly where I was before. This is pretty cool. So you can see loading and saving totally works on a mobile device, at least on the emulator. Let's see what it looks like an actual device. So again, let's close this off. And let's try it on my phone now. So I'm gonna choose to go to my phone. I think we've done a test that works on my emulator. We can't break my phone, or it's harder to break my phone now. Maybe it will break my phone, but I don't know. Let's see what happens. So build and run on my phone this time. And let's see if it works on my phone. Guys, this is so important to test on different devices. And the other great thing about this is that it works on mobile, right? Because remember, we're saving to an actual file on the mobile device. Persistent data is what's happening here, right? So I don't have to worry about keeping data persistent on a database. I can do it on a device, which is independent of the internet. I don't have to be on the internet to save my stuff. Okay, which is good. Okay, let's see. The phone is coming up. Let's see if it's going to come up in a second. I'm going to bring out my little player. Here's my little player for the phone. Okay. And how about we load my game? How about that? Cool. So I back up. I can jump. I can turn. I can go out there, way out there, and turn around. And now I can bring up my little menu, and I can go pause. It's going to show me the pause thing nicely. I can unpause. Right? That's a little bit weird. I think my pause button's a little bit small. This whole menu here is a little bit small for my finger in practice. So in reality, it's not great. I might want to make these buttons even bigger than what they are right now and take up more room. All right, how about load? So load actually puts me where it's supposed to be, but it doesn't change my direction. Okay, let's see if I can save now. So let's put that away and go over here and look over here, and let's save over here. Let's actually save right over where I can see my little man over there. There's my little agent on the top right corner there. Okay, cool. And let's save. So I'm going to say, bring up my menu and save. Cool, I saved. And let's move away. It doesn't say anything about saving and everything else. And let's go pull it up again and load. And I'm teleported over there and I'm back. Right, so you can see that this is. So there's a couple of things still missing. I still need something like saved, loaded. In my game state label, I can switch around what it says, right? Game loaded, game saved, something like that, where I did something. It gives the user feedback that all this stuff is working, right? User interface is important. But that totally worked. Okay, cool. So this worked. That means loading and saving on my device is actually working now, which is amazing, okay? But what I want to do is, for the last thing we want to do for today, all right, is let's try, let's put this up on GitHub first of all. So file, save project. Let's close this off. And let's put this up on GitHub and say, like, we have our first draft saving and loading. Okay, first draft saving and loading. Let's do that. So here I'll say git add dot git commit -m, and we'll say something like first draft saving and loading. Git push, which will push it up to GitHub. All right. So thoughts. How about my thoughts? Let's see what you guys are thinking now. How are you thinking about this? Is it good? Is it not good? What are your thoughts on this? Because this is kind of like a mechanism for saving and loading, and it really looks nicely. It can store all kinds of properties, right? It'd be nice if I can store my transform, but it looks like saving a complex object like a transform might be too much for this thing, okay? What about saving other player data, right? Well, we have to modify some stuff. So if I go back, and if I go back to data, and if I look at my scenes data SO, if I want to store other stuff like my player's rotation, player rotation, right? I want to save this too, right? So I want to save player position, and I want to save player rotation. Okay, cool. So then what I need to do is this main scene data SO is incompatible. So I have position and rotation, right? But notice I didn't save any of this stuff, right? And let's make my player's health 80 just to, save that information, right? We haven't saved health, by the way. We're just loading health. So we didn't save our health. Well, we are, but we didn't take any damage. Okay, how about if I want to load it now? So if I go back to my, remember that it happens on my control panel. So again, control, I want to go to my control panel. My control panel has my control panel object, which does my loading and saving. On load, not only does it change my position, but also it changes my rotation. Okay, so I can say player.transform.rotation is equal to my scene data dot rotation, player rotation. Okay, and that is incompatible. Why is that? Because rotation is a quaternion, and this is a vector 3. So I could save it as a quaternion. I could do that. Quaternion, right? Or I could save it as, I could say local rotation is what I want here. So local rotation, and I can change that to, again, it's a transform local rotation, which is also a quaternion. So we don't want this. We want rotation, and we want player rotation to be a quaternion, not a vector 3. Does it work? By the way, there's other ways to do this, okay? But I'm just specifying. So let's go back to my, to my code. So I want to go back to my control panel controller, and I want to go back to my scene data SO and change my player rotation from a vector 3 to a quaternion. Okay. I want to save my player rotation as quaternion, and I want to go back now. If I look at my data, if I look at my main scene, my player rotation is now a quaternion. Other information in there, you can actually see the data in there. And then what I want to do is change my script. So in my control panel controller, right? Then now it should compute. So my rotation is a quaternion, my player rotation is a quaternion, everything's good. But do I need to make a drag and drop? So control panel, it says my game state player is there, pausable is my pausable, right? Where is my, on my control panel, where is my game scene data, main scene data? It looks like it's okay. All right, so it looks like it didn't mess up. All right, let's see if it saves now or if it gives me some weird ass data. All right, so first of all, let's back up and let's change directions. So we're looking, not that, right. There. Sorry, it's different on the simulator than it is on the player. I want to look at there. I want to save my data there. So I'm going to go here and save. And then I want to bring that up again and move forward and move to the right and move down here. And I'm going to click this and press load. Oh man, what happened? I mean, it said that it was going to save it. So what did it save? Here's my main scene data and didn't save. Why didn't it? I mean, I'm saying this is equal to that, so then how come? Well, let's go back to this. So transform rotation is a quaternion. What about transform local rotation? Maybe I mean that. All right, so transform local rotation is equal to player rotation. All right, let's just do that and load, because I saved my data, so I feel the play and then load, and it should be okay, right? So if I press on this and load, that's good, right? And then if I look around in a different spot, there, I just want to look around this way. And I want to save. Let's take a look over here and see if it saves anything. Save. No. If it's saved, then this would be saved here. My player rotation would be saved. So how do we do it? We didn't write in save method. Oh man. We wrote it in the local rotations, but we didn't write it here. All right, so let's go to, okay, cool, scene data. Let's change this back then. If we change local rotation, let's change this to scene data dot player rotation is equal to player dot transform dot rotation. Okay, there we go. So we want to save the rotation data. Okay, go back. We have this, and we press play, and we pull back. And we look to the right a little bit. Sorry, it's super sensitive now because of it being on the simulator. And it's looking over here, and I want to save. And hey, that looks pretty good. All right, cool. So then if I stop the game and restart it again, so this is the data, look how it persists between loads, right? And if I start it up again and I press load, then now we're also looking in the other direction. So there's both. All right, questions. Any questions around the stuff that we've done? So we've talked about loading and saving data. I've given the player data as an example. I've also done pausing and saving the game, pausing and starting the game up again. What else could you save? Anything that you want is the answer, and as much as you want. You can have multiple data elements. I'm just using one big scene data scriptable object, but you can have many. For example, I want to store up any item that I pick up. I pick up a sword. I want to put it in an inventory. I can have the sword stats, how much damage it does, how much does it weigh, as an example. What type of sword is it? The sword's description. All the same stuff that I've kind of listed here as an example. These are an example of a scriptable object, different kind of scriptable objects that you can have that can be used not just for storing data, but permanent data that's not going to change. So if I want to load something into inventory, I can have my profile here, and every time I pick up a sword, it'll even give me the icon for the sword that I want to put into inventory. So that's really interesting and very, very useful data. Guys, I'm going to stop today. I'm not going to go to 6:30. I'm going to stop a little bit earlier than normal. Why? I think we've done a lot. And I think this is a great place to stop. I've given you what you need for the most part for Sunday. Okay? Any questions around this? All right, guys, that's it for me today. I'm going to stop recording now. Please hit me up on Discord if you have any more questions. Thank you so much for your attention and your attendance. I'll see you guys next week. Good luck on Sunday. Oh, yeah, Lab 9. Woohoo! Lushy, you're the best. What do you record for Lab 9, right? Yeah. Thank you. See, she caught me. It's good. All right, excellent. Okay, so one thing to do is this, right? On eCentennial, For lab 9, let's do that thing. So under assessments, let's go to lab 9. First of all, let's enable it. We're not that many labs left, right? We have only 12 labs in this course. So it's the same as last time, actually. What we want is for lab 9 to be similar to lab 8, but this time we want to see it inside of an emulator. So one thing we want is, as for other labs, I want you guys to show it in the emulator this time around, okay? So when we do lab 9, right? So let's edit that. It's going to be due week 9, that's this week, and that's Saturday, March 20th, I believe, 2021 at midnight. And then for the instructions, what I want is, as per the labs, however, please include a screenshot of your game or of the example working in the mobile emulator. So I want to see that you're able to do a mobile emulator, or we'll say an Android device, if you want to deploy to the device somehow, whether you want to try that. Okay, so it's either in the emulator or an Android device. All right, and then from a restrictions perspective, we have to put those in place. So it's going to be due this Saturday at midnight. I knew something was missing. And it'll have a start date of today at, let's say, 3 o'clock. All right, so nice and early. Okay, save and close. And that should be your lab 9. Lab 9 will be available to you. It's individual. Again, you can see that about half of you do the labs. This is not good because they're worth 1% of your final grade every time. So please make sure you get the lab done. Lab 9 will be due with a due Saturday. Okay. Any questions around what we've covered today before we stop? Because that's it for today. All right. Thank you so much, guys. Enjoy and good luck on your submission for Sunday. All right. Otherwise, take care, and I'll see you next week.